NewThing is a catalyst for movements of reproducing churches. There are several ways you can get involved. First, we want to begin a conversation with you about how you can plant a reproducing church. You do not want to do this on your own. Let us connect you with others who want to start reproducing churches. NewThing is a place where you can experience a culture of reproduction. Maybe you should do a leadership residency, or possibly you're planning a church. Together, let's start a movement. NewThing wants to help you start your church and the next one and the next one.
Hey NewThing crew, I want to share some thoughts and ideas that I've been mulling over a little bit lately, in particular around how to kind of read and engage your neighborhood, particularly with a view to kind of neighborhood transformation. I think you guys know, at least I've spoken enough stuff that you guys have been at, where I always say that I think the mission of God's people is to alert everyone to the universal reign of God through Christ. So it's not just to grow churches or plant churches, it's not just to lead people to Jesus. All of those things are ultimately outworkings of our core business, which is to alert everyone everywhere to the reign of God, believing utterly and totally by faith that Scripture is true and that King Jesus reigns utterly and totally. Our job is to let people know about his kingship and alert people to what that reign looks like. So I've told you this stuff before, but a fundamental question we have to ask ourselves is, well, what does the reign of God look like in my town or neighborhood or village or parish or whatever you consider your particular field or area to be? So if I'm going to alert people to it in actual practical real terms, what is that going to look like? And then the second piece of that is also to then ask, well, in this place, at this time, among these people, it's going to take a particular expression. If we think that the reign of God is about justice and reconciliation, about beauty, about wholeness, healing, peace, justice, these sorts of things, then they're going to look different in their outworking wherever you happen to be. A poorer urban neighbourhood, it's going to look different in an affluent suburban neighbourhood. In a rural community or town, it's going to look different from a big city, and so on and so forth. I know you know all that sort of jazz. So one of the questions that I think lots of missionaries and church planters really have to come to terms with is, how am I going to figure out, if I know biblically what the reign of God looks like, how am I going to figure out what it means to kind of read my context and figure out specifically how do those things take root in the soil in which I find myself? So I've been reading this guy called Michael Mader, M-A-T-A, if you want to look him up and do some more research. Michael Mader is at Azusa Pacific University in California, and he's professor of urban transformation, I think it's called. He's come up with this thing called the 5 S's for reading or interpreting your context. And I thought I'd just share those with you as a kind of tool for ways in which you can start to kind of use this grid, these 5 S's, to kind of get a fix on the issues or needs or questions in your neighbourhood or your context in order to use them for alerting others to the reign of God. So let me run through them. He has 5 and I'm going to add an extra 6th one because I'm smarter than Michael Mader. No, because I think this one really deserves to be part of it. So here are his 5 S's. The first one is structure. So for him, you need to take very seriously the built environment in the place that you find yourself in. You've got to read the structures. For example, is this a suburban neighbourhood, mainly houses? Is it mainly houses with double-fronted garages and doors at the side? Does all the life happen out the back? Are the streets wide? Are they welcoming? Are there lots of dead ends in your neighbourhood, or are there freeways that run through that place? Is it high-rise, narrow alleys? What kind of buildings are there, and who were they built for, and why were they built? Now, trying to figure that stuff out starts to help you to give get a fix on, to whom have we been sent? Are they suburban people who value privacy and really don't want to be bothered? Are they urban communities of high level of need? Is there separation of rich and poor? The physical structures actually help you to get a fix on who it is that God sent you to. Now, in his book, he writes a whole bunch of questions you should ask to help figure that out. So let me read what they are. What structures exist here and who were they built for? What's their purpose? Is their purpose to separate people, or is it a purpose to bring people together? Who were they built by and who funded them? Like some suburban communities, they were designed by developers who have no interest in neighbourhood or relationships or mission. They just want to make money. So figuring out who designed this place and why it looks the way it does is super, super helpful. I was just talking to a guy recently who was saying that, like, in his neighbourhood, urban community, there are actually kind of local ordinances against the building of bars or coffee shops or third places. Like, the state is determining that you shouldn't get together in some way. Well, that's important to know that, and indeed to know the history of why that's the case. Are they old? Are they new? Are they well kept? Are they run down? Are they rentals? Are they owned? Are they businesses? Are there third places, as I mentioned before? Are there fences or barriers to certain parts of the community that you're called to? Read the structures. The buildings themselves tell you something about the kind of people that you've been sent to. If you're really interested in exploring this more, you can read Michael Mader or another book by a guy called Geringe called The Theology of the Built Environment. It's a bit heavy, but if you're super interested in exploring how do we think theologically about the way we build our cities and our neighbourhoods, it's super, super helpful. And it's the sort of stuff lots of church planters never, ever take into account. So the first S is structure. The second S is signs. Read the signs. Are there billboards? Are there signs on telephone poles? Is there graffiti? Is there public art? Is there illegal art? Is there lots of advertising? Who's it aimed at? Is it selling something? Again, it tells you who lives there. It tells you what's important to them. A lot of billboards about, like, life insurance or home ownership, it tells you who God is sending you to. Lots of graffiti, whether it's illegal, whether it's left or encouraged or not, that tells you something about what the community values with respect to beauty. I think beauty is a fundamental expression of the reign of God. You might have heard me say that before. So you got to read the signs to figure out how highly does this community value beauty, art, creativity, as well as what are their values, what's important to them. I'll give you an illustration. I was in a neighbourhood with one of my students recently. He's planning a church in that neighbourhood. We were sitting in a coffee shop. He was talking to me about how tough it is to kind of get a fix on the neighbourhood and work out who lives there and how to meet them and what ways he can kind of alert them to the reign of God. And I looked across the road, and above this supermarket, which was across the road, there on the second floor was a sign, Tony's Gym, the oldest continuous running gym in Australia. Now, this was a bit of a nondescript suburban neighbourhood, so it's like, how does this place have the oldest continuous running gym in Australia? I was like, I can't even believe that. That doesn't make sense. I pointed it out to him, and he's like, oh, I never even noticed that was there. I said, let's go over and ask that guy. So we go up the stairs. There's like an 80-year-old Greek guy called Tony there. He's been running the gym since the 1950s. And he says it's the oldest continuous one because there were ones before him, but they've all gone out of business. He's had it authenticated. Yep, it's the oldest continuous running gym in Australia. Cool. So I said to him, you've been here since the 1950s? So, yep, I've watched this neighbourhood change and grow. I've watched waves of immigrants come in. I've watched public housing being built. I've watched it now becoming gentrified. I've been here through all of that. So he and I get talking about the neighbourhood with my student standing there. This gym owner knows more about the neighbourhood than my student could ever possibly know. In fact, he spoke to me about the neighbourhood in the same way that a lot of good church planters would talk about it. He knew who lived there. He knew what their values were. He knew how to meet their needs. He knew that place. Now, my student would never have connected with that guy if he hadn't read that sign. Open your eyes, read the signs. It tells you something about who's living there. I think I mentioned before, and you may have heard me, I say that the guy who invented the stethoscope is a guy called William Osler. Inventing the stethoscope changed medicine because now you could listen to the human body. And he's noted for having said, listen to your patients. Their broken bodies are telling you how to heal them. Read the signs are telling you how to evangelize them. So structures, signs, third one is space. Open space. So not the building structures now. What are the open spaces in this place? In other words, where do people congregate? And when you're exploring them, there'll be parks, maybe elementary school gates, or it could be that there are lots of pubs or restaurants, entertainment kind of precincts. Could be walkways along rivers or whatever the case may be. Where do people go to find space? Find out where those places are. But then the second thing is ask yourself, do people talk to each other in these spaces, or do they just walk past each other like with their eyes averted? Is it a friendly or hospitable or welcoming place? Are the spaces where the community connects, or are they just spaces where people privately engage in fresh air and openness? You need to know that jazz. You got to figure out what it means for us to meet with people. My friend Alan Hirsch always talks about it's a little bit like lifting yourself up over the top of your neighborhood and seeing people like ants. You follow the ant trails, he says, and wherever they lead to, go there. Go to the spaces. So you need to know where they are. You need to be in those places. You might have to buy a dog to be in that dog park, or get some kids and put them in that school, or I don't want to press that too far, but you need to be in the places where you're likely to engage with those people. And you need to ask yourself, well, what does it mean for us to practice hospitality in this space? Years ago, I met a woman who worked with the Eden Project, which is a fantastic church planting initiative in the UK. They basically get middle-class, white, university-educated young people, and they place them in really hardcore, poverty-stricken public housing neighbourhoods. And I love them because somehow they're managing to mobilise hundreds and hundreds of these young people to actually embrace the challenge and the sacrifice of moving into places of very significant and high need. I was talking to one of these young women. She was saying that for one whole year she made it her project just to get people to look her in the eye and say good morning or good evening. She said whenever she walked down the hallway of her public housing block, or through a park or in some open place, as people approached you in the opposite direction, they would avert their eyes as they walked past you. And she thought, well, that doesn't seem like what the reign of God would be like. So just one tiny step in building relationship was, as she walked by, she would try and catch their eye as they went by, and she would say, morning. Early in the piece, they would just ignore her. Eventually, some would nod, then others would say good morning back. It took her a year to help shift the culture of the spaces in her place, just to get people to look each other in the eye, say good morning or evening or whatever greeting might be appropriate. Now that may not seem like a magnificent missional project, but when you learn that the spaces that you have around you are not places of hospitality, you need to start to refashion the culture in those places. So learn the spaces. What are they used for? How do I visit there? What kind of openness to interaction with each other is there? The next one, the fourth one, is social interactions. I've kind of strayed into talking a bit about that, I guess, with the eye contact kind of thing. But ask yourself, what kind of social interactions happen in this place? Some places, and I have to admit, like as a visitor to your country, I often find places in the south are way more socially interactive. Strangers just talk to you. In in lines in supermarkets or walking down the street. It's as an Australian, maybe for people in the north of the US, it's a bit weird, and it is a bit weird initially, but clearly it's a place where, no, you just talk to each other. It's a norm, it's expected. You need to read that stuff. If it's not a norm and it's not expected, you need to read, well, how do social interactions happen? Are there clubs that you need to join? Or where do people share ideas with each other? Are there debates or forums? Are there public discussions? Is it at the parents' meeting at the local elementary school? Or does the city host these kinds of gatherings and discussions? Communities talk, but sometimes you can't see where or how it happens. You need to dig in and explore the social interactions. So structures, signs, spaces, social interactions, where do they happen, what do they look like? I'll give you Mater's questions. Are there pedestrians in your neighbourhood? Do they walk for leisure? Do they walk pets? Are they doing it to get somewhere? Do they greet each other? Or do people just drive everywhere? Is everyone local, or are there out-of-towners in the place? If it's the latter, where are they from? Do people just hang out? Do people interact with strangers and with each other? What's the demographic in your neighbourhood? Are they retirees? Are they new home buyers? Are they long-termers? Are they just passing through? Is it a hostile or is it a friendly kind of environment? So learn to read those kind of social interactions and understand the cues. And don't take it at face value just because you've been there for a little while. Alan Hirsch and I were in Pittsburgh years ago, and we're talking about social interactions. Find third places, start to interact with each other, hang out, build relationships, follow the ant trails. And we were told by the guys from Pittsburgh, it's like, it's not really Pittsburgh. Like, it's an old German mining town. We're pretty keep to ourselves, not super friendly. I don't think that works here. And we were like, okay, well, it's your town. We'll take your word for it. Later that night, after the event, Alan and I are at a bar, at a pub, and this woman bumps into us. She had a few drinks. She apologises. Sorry. She said, I'm a little bit happy, she said, because I'm leaving Pittsburgh. And I said, oh, where are you leaving to? She said, I'm moving to San Diego. And I said, well, I've been to San Diego, and now I've been to Pittsburgh, and I think you're making a good choice. But just between you and me, why are you going to Pittsburgh? Why are you going to San Diego? And she said, well, the best reason. I fell in love with a guy from there, so I'm moving to be with him. And I was like, good on you. Like, she says, actually, I'm having a farewell drinks over here. All my friends are saying, you guys want to join us? So Alan Hirsch and I spent the night at Barbara's farewell drinks. At the end of the night, I'm hugging her like, goodbye, Barbara, the best in San Diego. This in the town where the Christians had just told us, not real friendly, not real open to interaction. I have found this to be a fundamental rule of mine. You never ask the local minister to show you around the town or to tell you what it's like. It amazes me how little they know. Maybe they just spend all their time with church people. I've been in towns where I've asked them, show me the spaces, show me the built environment, talk to me about who lived here, tell me. Often it astonishes me how little they know. I was in Southampton in England once, and I said, well, I got a couple of hours free, you want to show me around? The guy took me to IKEA, like the department store, the furniture store, because it's got a big window that looks out over the harbour. That was like, that's him showing me his town. It was like, clearly, you are not aware of the structures and the signs and the places that you're engaging and meeting with people. Later I was in London and I met this guy. It's like, oh, I'm from Southampton. I'm like, oh, I just came from Southampton. He said, oh, did you like it? I said, well, I went to IKEA. He's like, oh, did you go to this street? Did you drink in that place? Did you go there? No. The minister didn't know those places. So I want you to analyse the structures, the spaces. I want you to read the signs. I want you to explore social interactions and how they happen. Fifthly, I want you to look at the spiritual life of the town. Michael Mater says you should know every minister in town. You should know whether his or her congregation made up of locals or people who drive in, whether it's flourishing or whether it's diminishing. But more than that, if there's a Buddhist ashram, or if there's a Muslim community, or if there's a Baha'i community, or if there's just a super spiritual yoga teacher in town, you should know these people. This is your work. This is your business. You should meet them, knock on their door, have a cup of tea with them. Like, find out what's going on. Are people spiritually hungry? Is there a yearning for conventional religion, Christian religion, Eastern religion, no religion? Don't just tell me, oh, it's not a very religious thing because the churches are small. It could be a very religious community because there are people genuinely exploring deep alternative spiritualities. They're just not very visible because they're not in places of worship. Dig into the place, find out who's there. Now that's his 5. Structures, signs, spaces, social interactions, and spirituality. You explore those things, they will give you a treasure trove of information for how you can help people see the reign of God in and through relationships. But I'm going to add one more. I told you I'd come up with one that he doesn't talk about. I want you, 6thly, to learn the story of your neighbourhood. For instance, why does it have the name that it has? What's the history behind it? Not just who built it and why, but why does that community orient the way it does or organise the way it does? I haven't got time to tell you the history of my neighbourhood, but I know it. I know it really well. I know who founded it and when and why. I know how alcohol and blood is soaked into the soil of our neighbourhood. I know how that has resonances now, even today, in the social life of my community. Even people who don't know that story are actually living out its repercussions. Learn the story. Learn who came there, why they founded it, and how their lifestyles and their values have actually created resonances throughout history. Learn the story, because effectively, as a church planter, you are wanting to reshape or to add to the story of that place, to explore a preferred or different future to the one it would otherwise have had God not sent you there. Do the work of a missionary. Hard work. Analyse your place. Love those people by knowing them. Be among them and alert them to the reign of God, to the justice, the reconciliation, the beauty of the kingdom, and the wholeness and healing that's possible through Christ. Hey, all power to you, NewThing. Keep going.